The morning sun lit up the gardens of the Thompson estate. White flower arrangements lined the path to the altar. Ethan Thompson stood in front of the mirror, fixing his expensive silk tie. At 32, he had it all. CEO of a major tech company, about to marry the beautiful Olivia Rothschild, and more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Jake, his best friend and best man, walked into the room. "The guests are here. You ready?" Ethan nodded, but something didn't feel right. Ever. Since he took over as CEO, Olivia seemed more interested in appearing in magazines than spending time with him. She always had an excuse not to have dinner together, but never missed a charity gala where photographers would be present. "I need some air," Ethan said, grabbing his Ferrari keys. Jake tried to stop him. "Come on, man. The wedding starts in an hour. Just a quick drive. I need to clear my head." The winding road leading to the mansion had always helped Ethan think. The ocean breeze came through the windows as he drove, his mind racing with doubts about the wedding. Was Olivia really the one? Did she love him or just his money and status? A dog suddenly ran onto the road. Ethan swerved to avoid it. The Ferrari spun out of control. The world turned upside down as the car flipped. The last thing he saw was the blue sky through the broken windshield. Sarah Miller pushed her cleaning cart through the halls of St. Luke's Hospital. At 28, she had worked there for 5 years. Unlike other cleaning staff, she always talked to the patients, even those in comas. Her mother had been in a coma before she died, and Sarah remembered how lonely those days felt. The emergency room doors burst open. Doctors and nurses rushed in with a stretcher. Sarah moved her cart aside, catching a glimpse of the patient, a handsome man in an expensive suit covered in blood and glass fragments. Within hours, reporters swarmed the hospital. The unconscious man was Ethan Thompson, the billionaire who should have been getting married that day. Sarah watched as well-dressed people came and went, including a stunning woman who cried dramatically for the cameras, but checked her phone the whole time. That night, while cleaning his room, Sarah spoke softly to Ethan. "Quite a day you picked to end up here, Mr. Thompson. But don't worry, the nurses say you're stable." She noticed a designer purse left behind. The ID inside belonged to Olivia Rothschild. Sarah placed it at the nurses' station for safekeeping, wondering why Ethan's fiancée had left so quickly. Days passed. Olivia's visits became a show for the press. She arrived during visiting hours, perfectly dressed, photographers in tow. "Darling, please wake up," she would say, posing by the bed. "The wedding planners need your input on everything." Sarah couldn't help but notice how Olivia never touched Ethan, never stayed more than 15 minutes, and always had her publicist with her. Alexander Thompson, Ethan's older brother, started showing up with lawyers. Sarah overheard bits of their conversations while cleaning nearby, something about power of attorney and emergency board meetings. One night, while organizing medical supplies in Ethan's room, Sarah spoke to him again. "Your brother was here today. He seemed more interested in papers than in you. And your fiancé?" She sighed. "Well, at least the photographers got good shots of her crying. Jake visited every day after work, actually talking to his friend about their shared memories and company updates. He noticed Sarah's kindness and thanked her for keeping the room so clean. Someone needs to look out for him," Sarah said simply. A month passed. The media circus continued, but Sarah noticed concerning changes. Alexander held more closed-door meetings in Ethan's room. Olivia's visits became shorter, and she started appearing in gossip magazines, photographed at parties with a young actor. Sarah began spending her breaks in Ethan's room, reading to him from books she borrowed from the library. "They say coma. Patients can hear everything," she told him, "so I thought you might like some company that doesn't involve lawyers or cameras." One evening, Sarah overheard an argument outside Ethan's room. Olivia was talking to Alexander, their voices harsh, despite their attempts to whisper. "This is taking too long," Olivia said. "The press is starting to ask questions about why I'm still going to parties." "Patience," Alexander replied. "Once the board approves the emergency measures, we can move forward with our plan. You'll get what we agreed on." Sarah's hands trembled as she wiped down the window. Their words confirmed her worst suspicions. These people weren't waiting for Ethan to recover. They were waiting for something else. That night, she held Ethan's hand while reading from The Little Prince. She had just finished a chapter when she felt it. The slightest pressure from his fingers. Sarah's heart raced. She watched his face carefully, looking for any other signs of consciousness. There were none, but she knew what she had felt. "Mr. Thompson," she whispered, "if you can hear me, you need to wake up. I don't think the people around you have your best interests at heart. But I'm here. I'll keep watching out for you." Outside the hospital, autumn leaves fell from the trees. Inside room 507, a simple cleaning lady had become the only person truly fighting for a billionaire's life. Not his money, not his company, but his actual life. And somewhere in the darkness of his coma, Ethan Thompson began his long journey, back to consciousness, guided by the voice of someone who cared about him, not his fortune. Alexander Thompson sat in his brother's office, now temporarily his, looking out over the city skyline. Everything was going according to plan, maybe even better than expected. The board had just approved his temporary leadership of Thompson Technologies, and his first major move would be selling off their most profitable division to their biggest competitor. Michael Davis, owner of Davis Enterprises, smiled as he poured 2 glasses of expensive whiskey. "To new partnerships," he said, handing one to Alexander. "And to my dear brother's recovery," Alexander added with a smirk. Both men knew. They didn't mean it. Meanwhile, at St. Luke's Hospital, Sarah arrived for her evening shift. She had started bringing fresh flowers for Ethan's room. Nothing fancy like the expensive arrangements Olivia sent for photo ops, just simple daisies from the grocery store. "Good evening, Mr. Thompson," she said, replacing the old flowers. "The nurses say your vital signs are getting stronger. That's good news." As she cleaned, she told him about her day, about the funny old man in room 502 who always tried to sneak extra pudding cups, about the new nurse who got lost trying to find the pharmacy. Simple stories, but she noticed his heart rate always seemed steadier when she talked to him. Jake stopped by after work, looking worried. "Something's wrong at the company," he told the unconscious Ethan. "Your brother's making deals that don't make sense. I tried to question them in the board meeting, but he shut me down." Sarah pretended to be busy wiping windows, but she listened carefully. She had grown protective of Ethan over the past weeks. Later that night, Olivia rushed in, clearly agitated. She wasn't wearing her usual camera-ready outfit, and no photographers followed her. Sarah watched from the hallway as the socialite paced the room. "You need to wake up," Olivia hissed at Ethan. "Your brother is destroying everything we built. How am I supposed to be the wife of a billionaire if there's no billions left?" She checked her phone again. "And that stupid actor keeps posting about us online. I told him to wait." Sarah's blood boiled. Here was a man fighting for his life, and all his fiancée cared about was money and her public image. The next day, Sarah was cleaning near the nurses' station when she overheard 2 nurses gossiping. "Did you see that magazine?" one asked. "Olivia Rothschild was caught kissing that soap opera actor at some club. Poor Mr. Thompson," the other nurse said. "Good thing he's not awake to see that." Sarah's hands tightened around her mop handle. She wasn't usually one to judge, but the more she learned about the people in Ethan's life, the more she understood why he had needed that drive alone on his wedding day. That evening, she brought a new book to read, Pride and Prejudice. "You know Mr. Thompson," she said as she settled into the chair beside his bed. "Sometimes the people closest to us aren't who we think they are. But that also means strangers can surprise us in good ways." She had just started reading when Dr. Roberts came in for his evening rounds. He smiled at Sarah, used to seeing her there. "His brain activity has been increasing," he told her. "These little talks of yours might be helping more than you know." Sarah blushed. "I just hate the thought of anyone being alone." The doctor checked Ethan's vitals. "Keep doing what you're doing. Medicine can only do so much. Sometimes patients need a reason to wake up." After he left, Sarah took Ethan's hand, something she only dared do when they were alone. "Did you hear that? You're getting stronger. Now you just need to fight a little harder." She thought she felt his fingers twitch again. But before she could be sure, Alexander burst into the room with 2 men in expensive suits. "Who are you?" he demanded, looking at Sarah with suspicion. "I'm just cleaning," she said quietly, picking up her supplies. Alexander turned to his lawyers. Make sure all medical staff signs updated confidentiality agreements. I don't want anyone talking to the press about his condition. Sarah left the room, but lingered in the hallway. She heard Alexander on the phone. Yes, everything's set for the Davis merger. Once that's done, there's no going back even if he wakes up. That night, after her shift ended, Sarah couldn't leave. She sat in the hospital cafeteria, drinking bad coffee and thinking. She had no proof, but she was sure Alexander and Olivia were up to something terrible. The question was, what could a cleaning lady do about it? She was about to leave when Jake walked in, looking as troubled as she felt. He noticed her hospital uniform. You work here? Yes, I clean Mr. Thompson's room. Jake sat down across from her. Have you noticed anything strange about his visitors? Sarah hesitated, then decided to trust her instincts. His brother was here earlier, talking about some merger with Davis Enterprises, and Ms. Rothschild, well, the photos with that actor. Jake shook his head. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Alexander's dismantling the company piece by piece. Ethan built that technology division from nothing, and now they're selling it to our biggest competitor for a fraction of its worth. Can't someone stop them? Without Ethan? No. Alexander has power of attorney. The board trusts him. And Olivia? He looked around before continuing quietly. I think she and Alexander planned this together. She keeps pushing for them to declare Ethan permanently incapacitated so she can claim her share of his estate as his fiancé. Sarah felt sick. But Mr. Thompson is getting stronger. The doctor said his brain activity is increasing. Jake's eyes lit up. Really? Alexander's been telling everyone his condition is deteriorating. They talked for another hour, sharing everything they had seen and heard. By the time they left the cafeteria, they had formed an unlikely alliance. A company executive and a cleaning lady, both determined to protect a man who had no idea they were fighting for him. That night, Sarah stayed late again, reading to Ethan. I know you can hear me, she said softly, and I need you to know that not everyone has abandoned you. Jake visits every day. He's trying to save your company. And she squeezed his hand. I'm not going anywhere. We just need you to wake up before they take everything you've worked for. For a moment, she thought she saw his eyelids flutter. A small movement, barely noticeable, but it gave her hope. She didn't know that in his darkness, Ethan was indeed fighting to follow her voice back to the light. She couldn't know that while his body lay still, his mind was slowly piecing together everything she had told him, building a picture of betrayal and loyalty that would change everything when he finally opened his eyes. The next few weeks brought big changes to Thompson Technologies. Alexander moved the company headquarters to a new building, leaving behind the offices Ethan had personally designed. He fired long-time employees and hired his own people. The press praised him for modernizing the company, but Jake knew better. It's like watching someone destroy your home, Jake told Sarah during one of their regular coffee meetings in the hospital cafeteria. Yesterday, he fired Maria, Ethan's secretary of 10 years. She practically raised him after their parents died. Sarah stirred her coffee, thinking about how often she'd heard Maria's voice on the phone checking on Ethan's condition. Did she say anything? She tried to warn. The board about the Davis merger said she had documents proving it was a bad deal. Alexander had security escort her out before she could show them. While they talked, upstairs in room 507, Olivia was giving another performance for the society photographers. She had brought a famous psychic this time, claiming she was trying everything to help Ethan recover. The spirits say he's at peace, the psychic announced dramatically. Perhaps it's time to let him go. Olivia dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. I just want what's best for him. Sarah, who had returned to her cleaning duties, wanted to scream at their fake concern. Instead, she quietly changed the trash bags and pretended not to notice when Olivia's phone lit up with a message from her actor boyfriend. That evening, after everyone left, Sarah sat in her usual spot next to Ethan's bed. Your brother fired Maria today, she told him. She was trying to protect your company. Jake says the Davis merger is happening next week. I wish, her voice caught, I wish you could tell us what to do. She opened their current book. The Count of Monte Cristo. But before she could start reading, she heard voices in the hallway. Dr. Roberts was arguing with Alexander and another man she didn't recognize. "I won't falsify medical records," Dr. Roberts said firmly. "Mr. Thompson's condition is stable, possibly improving. I won't say otherwise, no matter how much money you offer." "Be reasonable," the stranger said. "The company needs closure. The shareholders need closure. Surely you understand the bigger picture here. The only thing I understand is that you're asking me to lie about a patient's condition. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have rounds to make." Sarah quickly pretended to be cleaning as Dr. Roberts entered the room. He nodded to her, then checked Ethan's vitals. "Keep talking to him," he said quietly before leaving. "I think he's fighting to come back." Later that night, Sarah was gathering her things to leave when she noticed Ethan's personal effects bag had fallen behind the bedside table. As she picked it up, a small flash drive fell out. The label read TT Project Files Backup. Her hands shaking, she called Jake. He arrived within 20 minutes, still wearing his work suit. "This must be what Maria was trying to show the board," he said, turning the flash drive over in his hands. Ethan always kept backups of important documents. He never trusted cloud storage for sensitive information. "Can you access it?" Jake shook his head. "It's encrypted. Only Ethan knows the password." He looked at his unconscious friend. "And he can't tell us." Sarah thought for a moment. "What about Maria? Would she know?" "Maybe. But Alexander's people are watching her. They've frozen her accounts, threatened legal action if she talks to anyone about the company." Jake ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "We need help. Someone with legal power who can stop this merger." "What about Ethan's lawyer?" Alexander hired a new law firm. The old one was... Jake's eyes widened. "Wait, Monica Chen. She was Ethan's personal lawyer, separate from the company. Alexander might not even know about her." Sarah watched as Jake pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway. When he came back, he was smiling for the first time in weeks. "Monica's flying in tomorrow. She says she has documents that could help us. Things Ethan put in place in case something like this happened. We just need to prove he's not as bad off as Alexander claims." Sarah looked at Ethan's monitors. "Dr. Roberts said he's improving. Would his medical records be enough?" "They might be, especially with that conversation we just overheard about Alexander trying to falsify them." For the first time since this started, Sarah felt real hope. She took Ethan's hand, not caring that Jake was watching. "Did you hear that? We found your backup files. And your lawyer's coming. We're going to fix this." Jake touched her shoulder gently. "You really care about him, don't you? Not his money or his company, just him." Sarah blushed but didn't let go of Ethan's hand. Someone has to. All these people visiting, crying for the cameras, making deals in his room. None of them see him as a person anymore, just an obstacle or an opportunity. "You know, before the accident, Ethan told me he had doubts about marrying Olivia. Said something felt wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. I think he knew deep down that she didn't really love him." Sarah thought about all the times she'd watched Olivia check her phone during visits, how she never touched Ethan except when photographers were present. How could anyone fake love like that? "Money makes people do terrible things," Jake said, "but it also shows you who your real friends are." They were interrupted by a soft sound, a change in the rhythm of Ethan's breathing. Sarah leaned closer, watching his face intently. His eyelids fluttered just like they had before. "Mr. Thompson," she whispered. "Can you hear us?" Jake pressed the call button for the nurse. "Come on, buddy. If you can hear us, try to squeeze Sarah's hand." They waited, barely breathing. Then, so faintly they might have imagined it, Ethan's fingers tightened around Sarah's. Dr. Roberts rushed in, immediately checking vital signs and pupil response. "Brain activity is definitely increasing," he said. "These are promising signs. But don't get too excited yet. Recovery from coma is usually gradual." After the doctor left, Sarah and Jake stayed, watching for any more signs of consciousness. They didn't know that in Ethan's mind, the darkness was finally starting to lift. He could hear them more clearly now, could feel Sarah's warm hand in his. Most importantly, he had heard everything. The betrayals, the schemes, and the unexpected loyalty of a cleaning lady who had become his lifeline. In his expensive penthouse, across town, Alexander Thompson celebrated with Michael Davis. certain their plan was almost complete. In her luxury apartment, Olivia posed for Instagram photos with her actor boyfriend, already planning her next social media move. Neither of them knew that their carefully constructed plots were about to unravel, all because a simple cleaning lady had refused to look the other way. Monica Chen arrived at St. Luke's Hospital early the next morning, her designer heels clicking, purposefully down the hallway. She looked exactly as Sarah had imagined a high-powered lawyer would: sharp suit, perfect makeup, and an air of authority that made everyone step aside as she passed. "Show me everything," she said, after Jake introduced. "Them?" Sarah led them to a quiet corner of the cafeteria and pulled out the flash drive they'd found. "We can't access it," Jake explained. "It's encrypted." Monica smiled for the first time. "The password is probably Maxwell 2009. That was his childhood dog's name and the year his parents died. Ethan used variations of it for everything, no matter how many times I told him to be more creative with his security." Jake pulled out his laptop, typed in the password, and the drive unlocked. "You're amazing." They spent the next hour going through the files. Sarah watched their faces as they read, not understanding all the legal terms but recognizing from their expressions that they'd found something important. "This is exactly what we need," Monica said, pointing to a document. 3 months before the accident, Ethan created a separate trust for the technology division. He transferred majority ownership to it, independent from the main company. Alexander can't sell what Ethan doesn't technically own anymore. "Why didn't anyone know about this?" Jake asked. "The trust doesn't activate until specific conditions are met. Ethan was planning to announce it after—" Monica paused, glancing at Sarah. "After he called off the wedding." Sarah's heart skipped. "He was going to call off the wedding?" Monica nodded. "He came to see me the week before the accident. Said he'd finally realized Olivia didn't love him, just his money. He wanted to protect the company before ending things with her. He knew she'd try to take everything she could in revenge. That's why he needed that drive that morning," Jake said quietly. "He was going to show me the trust documents, get my help breaking things off with Olivia." Sarah thought about all those Society magazine covers showing Olivia crying by Ethan's bedside, playing the role of the devoted fiancé while secretly dating an actor. "Can we expose her?" "Better," Monica said. "These documents prove she and Alexander have been working together for months. Look at these emails. They plan to take control of the company, sell off the most valuable parts to Davis, and split the profits." Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a text from one of the night shift nurses. "Dr. Roberts just got fired. New doctor starting tomorrow. Thought you should know." Sarah showed them the message. "Alexander must know we're onto something. He's getting rid of anyone who won't help him." "Then we need to move fast," Monica said. "I can file for an emergency injunction to stop the merger, but we need proof that Ethan's condition is improving. Without Dr. Roberts—" "I recorded it," Sarah said, suddenly. "Not on purpose. I was making a video diary entry on my phone last night when Ethan squeezed my hand. Dr. Roberts came in right after and confirmed his brain activity was increasing. It's all there." Monica's eyes lit up. "That's perfect." A dated video showing his improvement, followed by the doctor's immediate firing when he wouldn't falsify records. The judge will love that. They spent the next hour planning their next moves. Monica would file the injunction first thing in the morning. Jake would reach out to Maria, get her ready to testify about the documents she'd tried to show the board. Sarah would keep watching over Ethan, documenting any signs of improvement. That evening, after Monica and Jake left, Sarah sat in her usual spot next to Ethan's bed. "Your lawyer's pretty amazing," she told him. "She and Jake are going to save your company. I just wish—" She squeezed his hand gently. "I wish you could wake up and see it happen." To her shock, Ethan's hand squeezed back, stronger than ever before. His eyelids fluttered, and this time they opened slightly. Sarah's heart raced. "Mr. Thompson, can you hear me?" His lips moved, trying to form words. His voice was barely a whisper after months of silence. "Sarah." Tears filled her eyes. He knew her name. He'd been listening all along. Before she could say more, the door burst open. Alexander stood there, flanked by 2 security guards. "Get—" "Her out of here," he ordered. "She's no longer allowed in this room." "You can't do that," Sarah protested as the guards grabbed her arms. "He's waking up." "He's my brother, and I have power of attorney. I can do whatever I want." Alexander smirked. "Including deciding who gets to visit him." Sarah struggled, but the guards were too strong. As they dragged her away, she heard Alexander on the phone. "Move up the merger. Do it tomorrow. I don't care about the legal requirements. Just get it done." The guards didn't just remove her from the room. They escorted her out of the hospital entirely. Her supervisor was waiting by the exit looking apologetic. "I'm sorry, Sarah. They said if we don't fire you, they'll pull all their donations to the hospital." Sarah watched helplessly as the guards confiscated her ID badge. She pulled out her phone to call Jake, but she had no service. Alexander had thought of everything. She sat on a bench outside the hospital trying not to cry. After all these months of caring for Ethan, of fighting to protect him, she'd failed just when he needed her most. She didn't even have a way to tell Monica and Jake what had happened. A familiar voice spoke behind her. "Need a ride?" She turned to see Maria, Ethan's former secretary, standing there. "How did you—" "Jake asked me to watch the hospital tonight, in case Alexander tried something." Maria helped her up. "Come on, Monica's waiting at her office, and Sarah—" She smiled. "Thank you for taking care of him when the rest of us couldn't." As they drove away, Sarah looked back at the hospital. Somewhere in that building, Ethan Thompson was finally waking up, only to find himself surrounded by enemies. But this time, he had something he didn't have before. People who were ready to fight for him, not his money. In her purse, her phone still held the video that could expose everything, and in her heart, she held onto the sound of Ethan saying her name, proof that sometimes the most important connections form in the most unexpected places. The war for Thompson Technologies was about to begin. Alexander had money, power, and ruthless determination. But Sarah, Jake, Monica, and Maria had something stronger. The truth and the loyalty of people who remembered what it meant to care about more than just profit margins and social media fame. Monica's office buzzed with activity late into the night. Maria made coffee while Jake paced, making phone calls to board members who might be willing to listen. Sarah sat at the conference table watching her phone video over and over. The moment Ethan opened his eyes, proof that he was coming back to them. "The judge agreed to an emergency hearing tomorrow morning," Monica announced, hanging up her phone. "But Alexander's lawyers are fighting back hard. They're claiming Sarah's video is fake." "What about Dr. Roberts?" Maria asked. "He can testify about Ethan's condition." "Nobody can find him," Jake said. "It's like he vanished. His wife says he got a call about a family emergency and left town suddenly." Sarah felt sick. Alexander got to him somehow. Probably threatened. "His medical license," Monica said. "But we have something else." She pulled out a stack of papers. "Olivia's been busy. Look at these bank transfers. Huge sums moving from Alexander's accounts to hers, starting the day after Ethan's accident." Maria studied the documents. "She's been planning to leave him all along. The accident just made it easier." "And more profitable," Jake added bitterly. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Amy, one of the night nurses she'd befriended. "New doctor gave Ethan heavy sedatives. Says it's routine but seems suspicious. They won't let any regular staff in the room." "They're keeping him unconscious," Sarah realized. "So he can't wake up and stop them." Monica's face hardened. "That's attempted murder. We need to get him out of there." "How?" Jake asked. "Alexander has security everywhere." Maria smiled for the first time that night. "I worked for Ethan for 10 years. I know every back entrance, every service elevator, every security camera blind spot in that hospital. The real question is, do we have someone inside who can help us?" All eyes turned to Sarah. "Amy would help," she said. "And there's an orderly, Tom, who always thought Alexander seemed shady. But how would we even move someone in Ethan's condition?" "Leave that to me," Monica said, already dialing her phone. "I know a private medical transport company that owes me a favor. The real challenge will be keeping him safe once we get him out. Alexander will have people watching everywhere." "My grandmother's house," Sarah said suddenly. "It's an hour outside the city. She passed away last year, but I still have the keys. Nobody knows about it." Jake nodded slowly. "It's perfect. the last place anyone would look for a billionaire. They spent the next 2 hours planning every detail. Maria drew maps of the hospital layout. Monica prepared legal documents to challenge Alexander's power of attorney. Jake made arrangements with sympathetic board members for an emergency meeting. At midnight, Sarah's phone buzzed again. "The merger papers are on Alexander's desk," Amy texted. "He's signing them first thing in the morning." "Then we move tonight," Monica decided. "Sarah, contact Amy and Tom. Maria, you'll guide them through the evacuation route. Jake, get your board members ready. The minute we have Ethan safe, we need them to vote to suspend Alexander." Sarah's hands shook as she texted Amy. This wasn't like changing sheets or reading books anymore. They were about to kidnap a billionaire from a hospital, if anything went wrong. "Stop worrying," Maria said gently, seeing her face. "You've been protecting him all these months. This is just one more way to do it." At 2 in the morning, their plan went into action. Amy created a distraction in another wing of the hospital, drawing away most of the security. Tom, pushing an empty gurney, met Sarah at a service entrance. She had borrowed scrubs from Amy, and in the dim light she looked like any other hospital worker. Maria guided them through her phone, warning of security patrol patterns. They made it to Ethan's floor using the service elevator. Sarah's heart pounded as they approached room 507. The private security guard Alexander had posted was slumped in his chair, snoring softly. "Amy gave him coffee with a sleeping pill," Tom whispered. Inside, Ethan lay still, connected to monitors. Sarah checked the medication bags. "They've got him on 3 different sedatives." "Standard procedure for coma patients," said a cold voice. Behind them, Sarah's blood froze. She turned to see the new doctor Alexander had hired standing in the doorway, but before he could raise the alarm, Amy appeared behind him. In one smooth motion, she jabbed a syringe into his arm. He slumped forward, and Tom caught him. "Turnabout's fair play," Amy said, helping Tom lay the doctor on the floor. "That's the same sedative he's been giving Ethan. He'll wake up with a headache and no memory of the last hour." They worked quickly, disconnecting monitors and transferring Ethan to the gurney. Sarah held his hand the whole time, whispering reassurance even though the sedatives kept him deeply unconscious. The journey through the hospital's back corridors felt endless. Every shadow made Sarah jump. Every distant voice sent her heart racing. But Maria's directions were perfect. They reached the loading dock just as a private ambulance backed up to it. The paramedics worked fast, transferring Ethan and his essential medical equipment. "We've got everything he needs," the lead paramedic assured Sarah. "We'll keep him stable until the sedatives wear off." Sarah climbed into the ambulance with him. As they drove away, she saw Alexander's car pulling up to the hospital's main entrance. He was early, probably too excited about the merger to sleep. She imagined his face when he discovered the empty room, and for the first time since this started, she smiled. Let him rage, let him threaten. They had what mattered most: Ethan himself, safe from his brother's schemes. The ambulance wound through dark city streets, then onto the highway. Sarah kept her hand on Ethan's chest, feeling his steady heartbeat. They had risked everything to save him, and now their real fight was about to begin. Dawn was breaking as they turned onto the dirt road leading to her grandmother's house. The old Victorian home sat back from the road, surrounded by overgrown gardens. It wasn't much compared to Ethan's mansion, but right now it was the safest place in the world for him. The paramedics set up a makeshift medical station in the main bedroom. Amy arrived shortly after, having finished her shift, ready to monitor Ethan as the sedatives wore off. "The board meeting starts in 2 hours, Jake texted. Alexander's going crazy looking for Ethan. Monica's filing papers to remove his power of attorney based on criminal endangerment. Sarah sat beside Ethan's bed, just like she had done so many nights in the hospital. But this time was different. This time she wasn't just a cleaning lady watching over a patient. She was part of something bigger, a fight for justice, for loyalty, for the kind of love that had nothing to do with money or power. "We're safe now," she told him softly, "and when you wake up, everything's going to be different, I promise." Outside the window, the sun rose over the overgrown garden, painting the world in shades of hope. In a downtown boardroom, Monica prepared to expose months of corruption. In the hospital, Maria collected security footage proving Alexander's crimes, and in a peaceful bedroom in an old Victorian house, a billionaire slept, finally free from the people who had tried to destroy him, protected by the unlikely group of people who had chosen to save him instead. Alexander Thompson slammed his fist on his brother's empty hospital bed. "What do you mean you don't know where he is?" he shouted at the security team. "He's a coma patient. He didn't just get up and walk out." The new doctor he'd hired was still groggy, nursing a headache. "Someone drugged me," he mumbled, "just like we were." "Shut up," Alexander hissed, glancing at the security guards. The last thing he needed was for anyone to hear about the sedatives they'd been giving Ethan. His phone buzzed. The caller ID showed, "Olivia." "Have you found him?" she demanded without greeting. "Not yet, but we have bigger problems. The board called an emergency meeting. Monica Chen is involved." "Monica, that stuck-up lawyer." Olivia's voice rose. "She knows about the trust. Ethan must have told her everything." "Calm down," Alexander snapped. "Just stick to the plan. Go to the meeting, play the worried fiancé. Let me handle the rest." Meanwhile, at Sarah's grandmother's house, Amy checked Ethan's vitals. "The sedatives are wearing off," she reported. "His brain activity is increasing." Sarah hadn't left his side since they arrived. The bedroom looked strange now, filled with medical equipment. The flowered wallpaper and old family photos seemed to belong to another world entirely. "Sarah?" Jake called from downstairs. "Monica needs to talk to us." She squeezed Ethan's hand before heading down to the living room where Monica's face filled her laptop screen. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes, Monica said. "Alexander and Olivia just arrived. They're acting like nothing's wrong, claiming Ethan's still in the hospital." "What? About the merger?" Jake asked. "Davis is here too, ready to sign the papers, but I've got something they don't expect." Monica held up a document. Ethan's original will, the one he changed right before the accident. Maria, who had just arrived, with coffee for everyone, leaned closer to the screen. "What does it say?" He removed Olivia completely, and he added a clause about Alexander. If he ever tried to sell the technology division, he'd lose his shares in the company. "It's like he knew," Sarah said softly. "He was planning for something. Like this." "He always was the smart one," Maria smiled. "That's why Alexander hated him so much." Upstairs, Amy called out suddenly, "He's moving!" Sarah ran up the stairs, her heart pounding. Ethan's eyes were open, clearer than they'd been in the hospital. He was trying to speak. "Don't try to talk yet," Amy said professionally, checking his pupils. "You've been sedated for a while. Give it time to wear off completely." But Ethan grabbed Sarah's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. His voice was hoarse but determined. "The password," he whispered. "Need to tell you, the password—" "It's okay," Sarah assured him. "Monica figured it out. Maxwell 2009. We found everything on the flash drive." He shook his head slightly. "Second file. Hidden partition. Maxwell 2019. Jake, who had followed Sarah upstairs, was already pulling out his laptop. He entered the new password and dozens of new files appeared. "Oh my God," he breathed, scanning the documents. "Ethan, you brilliant bastard. He has recordings, phone calls, meetings, everything. Alexander and Olivia planning the whole thing. Months before the accident. Get them. To Monica," Ethan managed before exhaustion overtook him. His eyes closed, but this time it was natural sleep, not induced unconsciousness. Downstairs, Monica's voice came through the laptop speakers. "The meeting's starting. Alexander's making his pitch for the merger." Sarah looked at Jake. "Send her the files now." In the Thompson Technologies boardroom, Alexander stood confidently at the head of the table. "This merger with Davis Enterprises is exactly what my brother would want," he was saying. "A chance to take the company global." Monica's hand shot up. "Before we continue, I have some materials the board needs to review." She connected her laptop to the room's display screen. Alexander's own voice filled the room. "Once he's married to you, we can move forward. The accident has to look real." Olivia's voice, "Just make sure he can't wake up to stop it. I didn't play the perfect girlfriend for 2 years just to walk away with nothing." The color drained from Alexander's face. Olivia dropped her grieving fiancé act and stood up, pointing at Monica. "Those recordings are fake." Really? Monica smiled. Because we have the originals, time-stamped and authenticated. And that's not all. She played another recording, Alexander bribing the new doctor to keep Ethan sedated. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Security guards moved to block the doors as Alexander tried to leave. Davis, the merger partner, was already calling his lawyers. Through the laptop camera, Sarah and the others watched justice unfold. Board members shouted for Alexander's arrest. Olivia broke down crying, blaming everything on Alexander. Police officers entered the room, reading rights and placing handcuffs. "We did it," Maria whispered, tears in her eyes. "We actually did it." Sarah slipped back upstairs. Ethan was still sleeping peacefully, his face relaxed for the first time since she'd known him. She took his hand, remembering all the nights she'd sat just like this, reading to him, talking to him, believing somehow he could hear her. "Your company's safe," she told him softly. "Your brother can't hurt you anymore. Olivia can't pretend to love you for your money. You're free." His fingers tightened around hers and his eyes opened again. This time they were completely clear. "Thanks, eh? You," he said, his voice stronger, "for everything, for being real in a world of fake people." Sarah felt tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'm just a cleaning lady," she said. Ethan shook his head slightly. "You're the person who saved my life, who saw me as a human being, not a bank account." He took a shaky breath. "While I was in that coma, your voice was my anchor. Your stories kept me fighting. Your kindness showed me what real love looks like." In the distance, sirens wailed as police cars surrounded the Thompson Technologies building. Reporters gathered, hungry for the story of corporate betrayal and attempted murder. But in a peaceful bedroom in an old Victorian house, none of that mattered. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances shared a moment of pure truth. A billionaire who had learned the hard way that money couldn't buy loyalty. A cleaning lady who had risked everything to protect someone society said wasn't her concern. And somewhere between the midnight readings and the quiet conversations, between fighting for justice and choosing kindness over greed, they had discovered something rare and precious, a love based not on wealth or status, but on the simple truth of two hearts recognizing their match. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. News vans camped outside Thompson Technologies, broadcasting every detail of the scandal. Alexander and Olivia's arrest made headlines across the country. "Billionaire's brother attempts murder for money," screamed one tabloid. "Gold-digging fiancé caught in murder plot," declared another. But no one could find Ethan. Reporters searched every private hospital and luxury rehabilitation center in the state, not knowing he was recovering in a modest Victorian house, surrounded by people who actually cared about him. "Your brother's refusing to talk to investigators," Jake reported, showing Ethan the morning paper. "But Olivia's singing like a bird, trying to cut a deal." Ethan sat propped up in bed, getting stronger each day. "Of course she is," he said. "Olivia always looks out for herself first." Sarah entered with a tray of soup, her grandmother's recipe. "You need to eat something," she insisted. "Doctor's orders." Amy, who had taken leave from the hospital to help with Ethan's care, nodded approvingly. "Your strength is coming back, but you need proper nutrition." As Sarah helped him with the soup, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. She had saved him in every way a person could be saved, and she still acted like it was nothing special. Maria arrived with more news from the office. "The board appointed Jake as interim CEO," she announced, "and Monica's filing charges against Davis Enterprises for conspiracy." "What about the technology division?" Ethan asked. "Safe," Jake assured him. "The trust you set up protected it completely. Davis is trying to back out of everything, claiming Alexander misled him." Ethan managed a small laugh. "He probably did. My brother never could tell the whole truth about anything." Later that evening, after everyone else had gone, Sarah sat in her usual spot beside Ethan's bed. But instead of reading, they talked. Really talked for the first time. "Why did you do it?" Ethan asked softly. "Why risk everything for someone you didn't even know?" Sarah thought for a moment. "I knew you," she said finally. "Not the billionaire CEO, not the man in the society pages. I knew the person who needed someone to care, to listen, to fight for him when he couldn't fight for himself. But you could have lost your job, gone to jail even, helping me escape from the hospital. Some things are more important than playing. It's safe." She smiled. "My grandmother taught me that. This was her house, you know. She used to say that doing the right thing isn't about what you might lose. It's about what everybody loses when good people stay quiet." Ethan reached for her hand. "Tell me about her." So Sarah did. She told him about growing up in this house, about her grandmother teaching her to bake cookies and stand up for what she believed in, about losing her parents young, just like he had, about working through college as a hospital cleaner and staying on because she discovered she was good at bringing comfort to people who needed it. "That's why you talked to me in the hospital," he realized, "even when I was in the coma." "My mother was in a coma before she died," Sarah admitted. "I used to read to her, tell her about my day. The doctors said she probably couldn't hear me, but I wanted her to know she wasn't alone." She squeezed his hand. "When I saw you in that hospital bed, surrounded by all those expensive flowers, but no one who really cared—" "You cared," Ethan said softly. "More than my own brother. More than the woman I was going to marry." A comfortable silence fell between them. Through the window they could see the overgrown garden silvered by moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. "I need to tell you something," Ethan said finally. "Something I realized while I was in that coma." Sarah's heart beat faster, but she tried to keep her voice steady. "What is it?" "All those months lying there, unable to move or speak, I could hear everything. The doctors, the nurses, my brother plotting, Olivia's fake grief, but your voice was different. You talked to me like I was a person, not a problem to solve or a fortune to steal." He took a shaky breath. "I fell in love. With your voice first. Your kindness, your stories. The way you saw through all the lies around me. And now getting to actually know you." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I'm falling in love with all of you." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "Ethan, I know it's crazy," he continued quickly. "I'm still recovering. You're technically still my caregiver. There are a million reasons why this is complicated, but nearly dying taught me something important. Life's too short to waste time denying what's real." "And what's real?" Sarah whispered. "This, us, the way I feel when you're near me. The fact that you risked everything to save me without wanting anything in return." He touched her cheek gently. "I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who only wanted what I could give them, but you just gave. Your time, your compassion, your courage." Sarah leaned into his touch. "I was so scared," she admitted, "when Alexander had me thrown out of the hospital, when we were sneaking you out. Every time I thought we might fail, I realized I wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. I was fighting for you." Ethan pulled her closer until their foreheads touched. "Sarah Miller," he said softly, "would you think I'm completely insane if I told you I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me?" She laughed through her tears. "Probably not the best time to make life-changing decisions. You're still recovering from being drugged. I've never been more clear-headed in my life." His eyes held hers. "I almost lost everything, my company, my life, my faith in people. But because of you, I found something more valuable than all of it. I found real love, the kind that doesn't care about bank accounts or social status." Sarah looked around the room at the medical equipment, the peeling wallpaper, the family photos on the walls. "You know I come with all of this, right? No mansion, no designer clothes, just an old house full of memories and a job helping people who need it." "You come with truth," Ethan said, "with courage and kindness, and a heart big enough to save a stranger. That's worth more than every penny in my bank account." Outside, a shooting star streaked across the sky unseen. Inside, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances shared their first kiss, gentle, sweet, and full of promise. And in that moment, all the gossip headlines and scandal stories faded away. The true story wasn't about betrayal or greed or corporate takeovers. It was about the power of genuine love to heal, to restore faith, and to remind us that sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as simple acts of kindness. News of Alexander and Olivia's arrest spread like wildfire through New York's social circles. The same society magazines that had once praised Olivia's devoted vigil at Ethan's bedside now dissected every detail of her betrayal. Photos surfaced of her secret meetings with Alexander, her dates with the actor while Ethan lay unconscious. But the biggest story remained a mystery. Where was Ethan Thompson? Rumors flew. Some said he'd been secretly flown to Switzerland for treatment. Others claimed he was hidden away in a private island hospital. No one suspected he was falling in love in a simple Victorian house on the outskirts of town. The press is going crazy, Jake said, showing them the morning papers. They're calling it the scandal of the decade. Ethan, now strong enough to sit in the garden, barely glanced at the headlines. Let them talk. For once in my life, I don't care what they're saying about me. Sarah brought out a tray of coffee, setting it on the old garden table. The morning sun caught her hair, and Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. How had he ever thought Olivia's practice glamour was beautiful? True beauty was in Sarah's genuine smile, in the gentle way she cared for others, in the strength that had made her fight for justice when everyone else chose greed. Maria arrived with updates from Monica. Alexander's lawyer is pushing for a plea deal, she reported. He's offering to tell everything about the Davis merger in exchange for a lighter sentence. And Olivia, Jake asked, still trying to play the victim, claims Alexander manipulated her, that she only went along with it because she was afraid of him. Maria snorted. The recordings prove otherwise, of course. Amy came out to check Ethan's vitals. She insisted on maintaining a proper medical routine. Blood pressure's normal, she announced, and your strength is improving daily. Soon you won't need me anymore. You'll always be family, Sarah told her. All of you will. After what we've been through together. They all understood. The crisis had forged bonds stronger than mere friendship. They had fought side by side, risked everything for what was right. That kind of loyalty couldn't be bought, as Ethan had learned the hard way. Later that afternoon, Monica visited with more legal papers. The board wants you back as CEO, she told Ethan, but only when you're ready. Jake's doing a great job, cleaning up Alexander's mess. There's something else I need you to prepare, Ethan said. Documents transferring half my personal shares to Sarah. Sarah nearly dropped the glass she was holding. Ethan, no, I don't want your money. He took her hand. I know you don't. That's exactly why I want you to have it. Not because you want it, but because you've earned it. Because I trust you to use it the way I always wanted my wealth to be used, to help people, to do what's right. But, no. But, he said firmly. I almost lost everything because I trusted the wrong people. Now I want to make sure the right person has the power to protect what matters. He looked at Monica. Can you draw up the papers? Monica smiled. Already did. I had a feeling you'd ask. She pulled out a folder. I also have something else you should see. The police found Olivia's private diary during their investigation. You need to read what she wrote about the day of your accident. Sarah started to leave the room to give them privacy, but Ethan held onto her hand. Stay, no more secrets. Monica opened the diary to a marked page and read, Everything's set for tomorrow. Alexander promised the car's brakes will fail at exactly the right spot. Enough to put Ethan in a coma but not kill him. Dead, his money goes to charity. But brain damaged, with me as his devoted fiancé and Alexander as his legal guardian, we can take everything. Sarah felt sick. They didn't just take advantage of the accident, they caused it. The police are adding attempted murder charges, Monica said. No deals, no lighter sentences. They're going away for a long time. That evening, after everyone left, Sarah and Ethan sat in the garden watching the sunset. The old roses her grandmother had planted filled the air with sweetness. Are you angry? Sarah asked softly. About Olivia and Alexander? Ethan thought for a moment. Strangely, no. I'm grateful. Grateful? They tried to kill you. And in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift of my life. He turned to face her. They showed me the difference between real and fake love. If I hadn't ended up in that hospital, if you hadn't been there to talk to me, to care about me as a person, he touched her cheek gently. I might have spent my whole life surrounded by people who only wanted my money, never knowing what true love feels like. Sarah leaned into his touch. When I first started talking to you in the hospital, I never imagined. That you'd end up saving a billionaire from his evil brother and gold-digging fiancé. Ethan smiled. Sounds like something from a soap opera. Life is stranger than fiction sometimes. She looked around the garden, at the worn furniture and overgrown flower beds. Are you sure you don't miss your mansion? All the luxury? The mansion was just a house filled with expensive things. This, he gestured to the garden, the old Victorian home, the simple peace of their surroundings. This is a home filled with love, with real people who proved their loyalty, not because of what I could give them, but because of who I am. Sarah kissed him softly. And who are you, Ethan Thompson? I'm a man who lost everything and found something more precious. Who learned that true wealth isn't in bank accounts but in having people you can trust. Who discovered that sometimes a cleaning lady with a pure heart is worth more than all the socialites in New York. As darkness fell, they remained in the garden talking about the future, not about money or business deals, but about simple dreams, about making the old house a real home again, about using their resources to help others, about building a life based on the kind of love that only comes once in a lifetime, if you're lucky enough to recognize it when it appears. Inside, the stack of newspapers lay forgotten, their scandalous headlines already yesterday's news. The real story, the one no reporter would ever fully capture, was writing itself in a garden where an unlikely couple had discovered that life's greatest riches come disguised as simple moments of pure, undoubted love. The courthouse buzzed with activity. On the morning of Alexander and Olivia's trial, reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing as police cars arrived. The biggest financial scandal of the year was about to reach its climax. Sarah watched the news coverage from her grandmother's living room, her hand tight in Ethan's. They had managed to keep his location secret for weeks, but today, everything would come out. Are you ready for this? She asked softly. Ethan nodded. As long as you're with me. They had planned everything carefully. Jake would pick them up in a private car with tinted windows. Monica had arranged for them to enter through a secure entrance, avoiding the media circus out front. But once inside, Ethan would have to face his brother and ex-fiancée for the first time since waking from his coma. I'll be right beside you, Sarah promised. Amy did one final check of Ethan's vitals before they left. Blood pressure's a little high, but that's normal given the circumstances. Just remember to take breaks if you feel overwhelmed. Maria arrived with coffee for everyone. The press is already calling it the trial of the century. Society people attempted murder, corporate betrayal, they're eating it up. Let them, Ethan said. Maybe someone will learn something about trusting the wrong people. The drive to the courthouse felt surreal. Sarah watched the city pass by, remembering all those nights she'd spent reading to an unconscious man, never dreaming she'd fall in love with him, never imagining she'd be heading to court to testify against people who had tried to kill him for money. Jake parked in a secure underground garage. Monica was waiting for them, looking sharp in her courtroom suit. Alexander's lawyer made one last attempt at a plea deal this morning, she reported, still trying to blame everything on Olivia. And Olivia? Sarah asked, still playing the victim. She's dyed her hair brown, started dressing simply, trying to look more innocent. Monica smirked. Wait until the jury hears those recordings. They took a private elevator to the courtroom floor. Through a window, Sarah caught a glimpse of the media frenzy outside. Dozens of reporters stood in the rain, microphones ready, waiting for any snippet of news. The courtroom was already packed when they entered through a side door. Her gasp went through the crowd as people recognized Ethan. He looked different from the society photos they knew, stronger, more real somehow, his hand clasped firmly with Sarah's. Alexander and Olivia sat at separate tables with their lawyers. Alexander wore an expensive suit, but looked pale and drawn. Olivia had indeed transformed her appearance, wearing a simple blue dress, her newly brown hair pulled back modestly. She gasped dramatically when she saw Ethan, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Save the theatrics, Monica muttered. The jury's about to hear what you really think of him. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. The conspiracy, the sabotaged car, the attempt to maintain Ethan's coma. Through illegal sedation, Alexander stared straight ahead, his face blank. Olivia kept trying to catch Ethan's eye, playing the part of the remorseful fiancé. Then the evidence began. Monica's recordings filled the courtroom, Olivia's voice. "Once he's in the coma, we control everything. Just make sure he stays under until we've sold off the company." Alexander: "The sedatives are untraceable. No one will ever know." Olivia again: "I can't wait to be rid of him. Do you know how hard it's been pretending to love someone so boring? At least his money made it worthwhile." Sarah felt Ethan tense beside her. She squeezed his hand and he relaxed slightly. The wealthy socialites in the gallery whispered among themselves, shocked by the cold calculation in Olivia's voice. Then came the diary entries. The prosecutor read them aloud. Pages and pages of Olivia plotting with Alexander, laughing about how easy it was to fool Ethan, planning how they would spend his money once he was out of the way. During a break, Sarah took Ethan to a private conference room to rest. "You're doing great," she told him. "I keep thinking about how differently things could have turned out," he said quietly. "If they had succeeded, if you hadn't been there to save me," she touched his cheek gently. "But they didn't succeed. Love won, not greed." When they returned to the courtroom, it was Sarah's turn to testify. She told the whole story. The nights, reading to Ethan, overhearing Alexander's plots, discovering the illegal sedatives, organizing his rescue from the hospital. "Why did you risk so much for him?" the prosecutor asked. Sarah looked directly at the jury. "Because it was right. Because everyone deserves to have someone fight for them, no matter how rich or poor they are. Because real love isn't about bank accounts or social status. It's about seeing someone's true worth as a human being." In the gallery, several people wiped away tears. Even some reporters looked moved. Olivia's lawyer slumped in his chair, knowing his manipulated innocent defense was crumbling. The day wore on. Jake testified about the corporate manipulation. Maria presented evidence of Alexander's illegal board meetings. Amy explained about the sedatives and Ethan's improving condition that Alexander had tried to suppress. Finally, Ethan himself took the stand. The courtroom fell silent as he described waking up in the hospital, hearing his brother and fiancé plotting his death, being kept unconscious by illegal drugs. "How did you survive?" the prosecutor asked. Ethan's eyes found Sarah's. "Someone cared enough to see the truth, to risk everything to save a stranger, to show me that real love still exists in a world of fake people." Alexander's mask finally cracked. He jumped up, pointing at Sarah. "She's just another gold digger. She manipulated him while he was vulnerable." The judge banged his gavel. "Order." "She's the only one who never asked me for anything," Ethan said calmly. "The only one who cared about me, not my money. She saved my life, my company, and my faith in humanity. And now," he smiled at Sarah, "now she's saving me every day by showing me what true love really means." Olivia burst into tears, real ones this time, as she realized her act wasn't working. Alexander's lawyer quickly requested a recess. In the hallway, reporters clamored for statements, but Ethan and Sarah slipped away quietly, leaving Monica to handle the press. They had said everything that mattered in court. That evening, back in the Victorian house, they sat in their favorite spot in the garden. The old roses bloomed around them, their sweet scent a reminder of simpler, truer things. "It's almost over," Sarah said softly. Ethan pulled her close. "No, my love, it's just beginning. The bad parts are ending, but our story, that's just getting started." Inside, the evening news played footage from the trial, but in the garden, a billionaire and a cleaning lady who had found real love held each other, knowing that sometimes life's greatest victories aren't won in courtrooms or boardrooms, but in the quiet moments when truth defeats lies and genuine love conquers all the false gold in the world. 1 year later, the gardens of the Victorian house bloomed more beautifully than ever. Sarah's grandmother would have been proud to see the old roses restored, new flowers planted and life breathing through every corner of the property. The morning sun sparkled off the dew as Sarah walked through the garden, coffee in hand. So much had changed in a year. Alexander and Olivia were serving long prison sentences. The jury had taken only 2 hours to find them guilty on all charges. The scandal had faded from the headlines, replaced by newer dramas in high society. Thompson Technologies had not only recovered, but grown stronger. Jake's leadership during the crisis had impressed everyone, so much that Ethan made him permanent co-CEO. Together, they rebuilt the company's reputation, focusing on innovation and ethics rather than just profits. Maria returned to her position as head of office operations, but with a promotion and a seat on the board. She made sure no one could ever manipulate company documents again. Amy took charge of a new medical research division, using her experience to develop better patient care systems. Monica's law firm now handled all Thompson Technologies' legal affairs, with a special focus on corporate ethics and accountability. The flash drive that had exposed everything sat in a special display case in her office, a reminder that truth always finds a way. But the biggest changes weren't in the business world. They were in the lives of two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching Sarah enjoy her morning coffee. Even now, he sometimes couldn't believe how lucky he was. The woman who had saved him in every way possible had also agreed to spend her life with him. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, joining her in the garden. Sarah smiled, the simple gold band on her finger catching the sunlight. They had gotten married 3 months ago, a small private ceremony in this very garden. No society photographers, no elaborate displays of wealth, just real love, surrounded by the people who had proved their loyalty. "The roses look amazing," Ethan said, pulling her close. "Your grandmother would love what you've done with the place." They had decided to make the Victorian house their home, renovating it carefully to preserve its character while adding modern comforts. Ethan's mansion had been sold, the money going to a foundation they started together, helping hospital workers further their education. "I had a meeting with the foundation board yesterday," Sarah said. 10 more nurses are getting scholarships this year." She had kept her job at the hospital, not as a cleaning lady, but as director of patient care services. Her experience had shown her how much difference simple human kindness could make in healing. "Did you see the letter from Tom?" Ethan asked. The orderly who had helped rescue him was now in medical school, thanks to their foundation. "He's top of his class." Inside the house, photos told their story. The hospital room where they first met. The group that had fought to save Ethan, Jake, Maria, Amy, Monica, all smiling at the camera. The garden in full bloom on their wedding day. Not society photos meant to impress, but real moments of joy and love. The newspapers had called it a modern fairy tale, the billionaire and the cleaning lady. But they missed the point. It wasn't about rich and poor or high society and working class. It was about real and fake, truth and lies, genuine love and shallow greed. "I was thinking," Ethan said, taking Sarah's hand, "remember how you used to read to me in the hospital?" "Every night," she smiled. "The Little Prince, Don Quixote. Well, I think it's time we read to someone else." He placed his hand gently on her stomach. "Doctor confirmed it yesterday?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Yes, we're going to have a baby." Ethan pulled her into his arms, his own eyes wet. "Our child will grow up knowing what really matters. Not money or status, but kindness, courage, and real love. And they'll have the best extended family anyone could ask for," Sarah added. "Aunt Maria to teach them determination, Uncle Jake to show them leadership, Aunt Amy to care for them, Aunt Monica to fight for what's right." They had created more than just a marriage. They had built a family out of the people who had stood by them in their darkest hours. People who had chosen truth over profit, loyalty over greed, love over money. The morning sun rose higher, painting the garden in gold. Inside the Victorian house, breakfast was ready. A simple meal shared with love, so different from the elaborate society brunches of Ethan's past life. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked softly. "About leaving your old world behind?" Ethan looked at his wife, thinking of all they had been through. The betrayals that had led him to true love, the near death that had taught him how to really live, the loss of false friends that had given him a real family. "My old world was like a beautiful empty shell," he said. "Designer clothes hiding ugly intentions, fancy parties full of fake smiles, business deals based on lies." He kissed her gently. You showed me what real life looks like. Real love, real loyalty, real happiness. Sarah touched his face, remembering the unconscious man she had once read to, never dreaming he would become her husband. We saved each other, she said. You gave me the power to help others, and I gave you everything that matters, he finished. A love that's worth more than all the money in the world. In the distance, church bells rang, marking the start of a new day. But in the garden of the Victorian house, time seemed to stand still. A billionaire who had lost everything had found something more precious. A cleaning lady who had risked everything had gained something priceless. And their story, which had begun in a hospital room with a simple act of kindness, continued to unfold in ways that no society magazine could ever capture. Because real love stories aren't about wealth or status or power. They're about hearts that recognize each other, souls that connect, and the courage to choose what's real over what merely glitters. As Sarah and Ethan sat in their garden planning their future and the new life growing inside her, they knew that sometimes the greatest fairy tales aren't the ones about poor girls becoming princesses. They're about two people who see past all the masks and mirrors of the world to find something true, and in that truth they find not just love but home,